Hi, I'm Celia. I've been a customer success engineer at Plotly for 3 years, and I'm going to share with you some of my tips and tricks to diagnose issues in a Dash app. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use the Elements tab of the browser's DevTools to get information about the CSS classes and styles that are being applied to a Dash app layout. For this demo, I'm going to use the same app that I have used in previous videos. However, I have added some styling to most of the Dash components in the page. For example, I have added some blue color to the title of the first section and also to the border of this div. And I have also added a red dashed border to the divs in the second section. I'm going to show you how I did that in the code. For that, we are going to visit the Dash Enterprise workspace where this app is running. This is the code for the app. Since we are going to be focusing on the layout in this video, I'm not going to talk about the callbacks. Let's see how I have added some styling to the first section. For the title, I have added the color with this style argument. And for the div, I have used two things. One of them is also the styling. I have added some border style, solid, and some border color, cornflower blue, which is the same blue as here. But I have also added a class name, my custom div. The ID for this div is my output div. If I scroll down, this is the code for the second section. And in this case, I have only used the class name, my custom div, for both divs. When I include a class name, I need to also include some CSS style sheets that specify what that class name refers to. In some cases, we include external style sheets, like this one, which is a CSS file hosted externally, but I can also add my own. For that, I need to create an assets folder, and I need to add some CSS files. So this style that I have defined here will apply to all of the components in the layout where I have specified class name equals my custom div. This dot before my custom div indicates that I'm referring to a class. In this other CSS file, I have a general rule for all of the div components that are in the layout. In this case, it's just a border color, green. However, if we go back here, we don't have any div with a green border. Why? Let's answer that question. To investigate how CSS styles and classes are being applied to a Dash app, the first thing I need to do is to open the inspect window. For that, I'm going to right-click anywhere and select this option in the menu. By default, the tab that will appear is the Inspector tab, that's how it's called in Mozilla, or the Elements tab, that's how it's called in Chrome. What we are seeing here is the HTML structure of the elements that are currently present on the page and their content, even if they are not visible. For example, if I had a div with the property display set to none, I would still see its representation here. There's a difference between element and component. One Dash component can be composed of multiple HTML elements. When we are talking about divs, typically the correspondence is one-to-one. One div Dash component is equivalent to one div HTML element. However, there are more complex Dash components like the DCC radii items that correspond to multiple HTML elements. First, we are going to see an example where one Dash component corresponds only to one HTML element. For the first example, we are going to check the style of the first div, whose ID was myOutputDiv. Do you remember? It was this one. Okay, this is the one with the solid border of cornflower blue color, which also has this class name, my custom div. To find the representation of this div in this content of HTML elements, I could go one by one and collapsing the elements to find the one I'm looking for. But there's a shortcut for that. In the top left corner of the tab, there's this icon, a square with a pointer. When I click on it, I can hover or click on the element that I'm interested in, and the Elements or Inspector tab will be automatically uncollapsed and scrolled to show me the HTML representation of what I'm seeing on the page. See? Here it is. I can see that it has the ID myOutputDiv and the class myCustomDiv. Once I have selected the element, I can see in this region the CSS styles and classes that are being applied to it. The ones at the top have priority over the ones that appear farther down. The first cell includes the inline styles, as this text here indicates. The inline styles are the ones that are directly defined in the currently selected HTML element, either by us with style argument or by the developers in the source code. I can see here the border style and border color properties that I have specified for the style argument for the HTML.div. The following cells here include the styles that are inherited from parent components or defined in an external style sheet with CSS selectors. I can see here in the top right corner for each cell the source for the code. The first one is mystyles.css and the other one is otherstyles.css. These were the files that I had included in my assets folder. Border color appears in three sources: as part of the inline styles, as part of the mystyles.css file, and also as part of otherstyles.css. The second and the third time that border color appears, it's crossed out. If a CSS property is crossed out, it means that it is being overridden by a rule with higher priority. Again, the properties that appear farther up have priority over the ones that appear farther down. The priority of the styles is determined by what is called CSS specificity. I have included a link in the description box where you can read more about the hierarchy of the styles, depending on the method that is used to define them. This region or menu here is interactive, and it has a cool feature that is that it allows us to pre-visualize how the app would look if we modified some of these properties. For example, I can disable the effect of properties by unchecking the checkbox next to them. If I click here, we can see that the border color for the div has changed to red. Since I have disabled this, the property that is applied is the next with the highest priority. If I disable this one, it will go to the next one, which is the border color green. If I disable this one, which is the third one, the color that will be applied is black, because that's the default for the browser. These changes are temporary. If I refresh the page, the layout will go back to what is defined in the code. If I wanted to make any of those changes permanent, I would need to specify them in the app code. That is, I would need to modify either the code here or the code here. To finish the demo, we are going to see how CSS properties are applied to a more complex Dash component, one that is composed of multiple HTML elements. Specifically, we are going to look at the radio items component. When I have defined it here, I have only specified a class name, which is myCustomDiv. This myCustomDiv is the same class as the one that I had for the top div, and it sets, apart from some padding and some margin, the border color here as red and the border width. Let's see how the HTML elements of the radio items are represented in the HTML tree that we can see in the inspect window. I'm going to use the shortcut that I showed you before, and I'm going to select the radio items here. We can see that this Dash component is more complex than the previous ones because the ID that we have given to the Dash component in the Python code always appears in the outermost HTML element that is part of that dash component. The same happens to the class name. So here we can see the ID, countries radio, and the class name. Class equals my custom div. If we look at this region here, we can see that the my custom div class is being applied to the outermost HTML element. However, if I click in one of the child elements, like this one, the tree that corresponds to the Spain option, there's no mention to the my custom div class name here. There's no reference to the border color. Actually, I could try to specify here some border color, let's say yellow. And to make it visible, I also need to specify a border style. You can see that the border has been applied now, but before that, or if I disable this, no border is applied. Again, if I refresh the page, these changes will be gone. I will need to modify the code to make those permanent. Even though I can't specify that yellow border for the Spain label here as part of my Dash component code, at least for DCC radio items, there are other ways with CSS to specify styling if that's what I want. However, that's a topic for another video. And that's all. I hope that was helpful. This video is part of a series, so please don't forget to check the description box below, where I've linked other useful resources. Thanks for watching.